welcome everybody, and thank you for being here. What a pleasure it is to be able to share this space on a Wednesday morning. We're going to go into our third part of our series called More Than a Label, and I've titled it More Than a Label, so we can actually focus on some of those labels which we find ourselves getting in life, and how much of it are we believing and how much have we accepted. And if there's and as we live our lives, the invitation is really to say, let's live our lives recognizing that we are so much more than the label that we might have accepted that we gave ourselves or someone else gave us. And so what I'd really like to invite you to think about, if there's one thing you get from today's session, it's that, do you remember those old-fashioned signs we used to have in maths where you would have greater than or less than? And I want you to think about that the whole of me, the kind of W part, the whole, is far greater than the smaller part of me. And essentially, we get that when we talk about our bodies, right? That I need my mind, my heart, my body to be present to really experience life. But so often we miss that when it comes to our mind and the descriptions that we give ourselves. And we almost label parts of ourselves, and we forget that we are more than that one little label that we have given ourselves in life or accepted in life. And so I wanted to just invite you into the space of three concepts that I'd like to share with you today. The three concepts are this title of You're More Than a Label, and the second one is around spotting assessments disguised as facts. And then we have our third one, which is talking about healthy feedback to ourselves and others. And I wanted to use these two pictures as a kind of intro to the concept, just so that you'd kind of be with me and you could think about also, following this slide, I want you to think about that one label that you have in your life. It can be a positive or a negative label. It can be a strength or something that you see as a weakness, either one. But I'd like you now to just consider what label you have gathered in your life. So let's just quickly take a look at these pictures. When we have a look at this young man, if you look at him, it could be a young woman, but if we look at this young man, it's just like his life is full of possibilities. That water is so fluid, he's got many different kinds of items around him, and he sees all the possibilities that are in our life. However, along comes a human being who has a lot of rank, someone who's older, maybe is important to them, and they kind of assess this young man, and they might give them feedback like, wow, you really are a difficult young man. And over time, this young man kind of is curious about it, and over time, he recognizes he hears this quite a few times, and it almost becomes a fact in his life, and he kind of adopts this thought that I am a difficult young man or I am a difficult young woman. And over time, almost pigeonholes himself or herself into that space. And if you think about a pigeonhole and you just look at the definition of it, it's almost like we mentally, if you use it as a verb, like an action word, it's like we mentally label somebody and put them in a category. So if a singer sings a lot of genres, they can do a whole lot of genres, but a critique or a journalist comes along and says, oh, you really are good at an assessment, you really are good at a country. Now suddenly when that journalist prints this person now becomes basically known as a country singer, and it's almost, okay, they're good at country. And so we can start to pigeonhole ourselves in life into these spaces. And I want you to think about those spaces that potentially you might have pigeonholed yourself into. So now I'd like to just use a story. It's like one of those, almost those, I don't know if they're folklores that have happened over time, but it's a story and you might know it and might recognize it in another form. But it's almost about this young man who's lost his keys. Okay, they've been lost over here somewhere. He's lost his keys and he's busy looking. He's out here looking in this alleyway for his keys, and he's busy focusing on his keys underneath this light. And he's looking, and another young person comes along, or a whatever age young man comes along, or elder man comes along and says, "Hey, can I help you? I'd really like, you look like you're looking for something." And he says, "Yes, I've lost my keys. I'm looking over here." So this person comes along and starts helping them out looking for these keys. And after a time, they can't find the keys, and the second person says to the first one, tell me, you know, where possibly could you have lost your keys? Oh, he says, no, I lost my keys in this restaurant over here. So the second person looks to the first person and tells him, well, tell me why. Why are we looking under the lamp? And why are we here in the alleyway looking for your keys? And the first person says, yeah, because the light is over here. And I just want you to pause for a moment and think, where has the light been shone on in your life by you or others? And how is that driving your actions now, driving your actions and behaviors? Because sometimes we focus where the light is, but there is actually, that's not the key to where we are in terms of our opportunity and our life and how we can live our potential out in our lives. So let's just have a look at the difference between an assessment and a fact, because, you know, often we come to the situation where we focus our life based on somebody's assessment, and it's almost translated into a fact. So let's take a look at that example of that young man in that bath, and he has now had someone assess him. An assessment is basically an observation or judgment, right, that we make about somebody. We observe something and we make a judgment, which is natural, and we interpret their behavior in order for it to become an action, right? So I want you to think about that statement, you are a difficult young man. That's almost a statement of fact, right? This young person, or that you as the listener to that situation, are going to be faced with that interpretation that sounds to me like a fact, as opposed to actually giving me a sense of, okay, your actions, when you get angry and you start shouting and screaming, I find it very difficult or awkward to deal with. And now suddenly I can actually understand there's an action around my behavior that allows me to now focus my behavior on, okay, when I am angry, I need to work on the way in which I demonstrate that anger. So we forget that we are gathering information, we are developing an understanding, and we need to test our analysis when we're doing an assessment. We forget that part and we make a blanket statement, and the person is left without a sense of what action, and we treat it as a fact. So I wanted to just invite you into this place. So what is a fact? And just remember what a fact is. Now, I've invited you into this space because you may not already have related to, okay, I'm more than a label, because that might not have landed yet. But there might be a sense of, okay, the way I'm assessing things is creating some form of label because I almost treat it as a fact in life. So think about where that is happening for you. A fact is something that is independent and verifiable, right? So how much petrol I have put into my car, I can understand how many liters I loaded. It's independent and verifiable. I can understand the time, even though it's man-made. I can understand what is the time. I can understand the results of a game, and I can report on the facts of the results of a game. But when I say, oh, these people are terrible players, that is my interpretation. But sometimes I use it and I say it in such a way that it is almost a fact. And for some of you are sports fans, you may argue with me there, but I want you to just bear in mind the example that we're trying to, and get the concept of how we can turn these things into facts. So I'm going to take you into a space which might be quite new for you. I'm not sure how many of you work with quantum physics and have thought about and have been exposed to quantum physics. If anybody has had some exposure to quantum physics, please put up your hand now and go to your gadget and just put up your hand, just so that we know anyone who might be there. But I'm going to just use this concept of quantum physics now, this nice, beautiful, blank slide that we have, to actually talk about how scientists have opened up an understanding for you and I to understand how we how we can actually access energetically, how we can access different roles in our lives. So if you take a look at this blank slide and you just, for a moment, suspend what you might know or not know, and just come to the space and say, okay, let's find a common understanding in terms of people interaction of what I'd like to share with you. So if we all share energy, which comes in different forms, it can come in the form of a view or an emotion, okay? It can come in the form of an archetype. So in other words, we all have access to this potential whiteboard over here. So think about an archetype like, for example, at the moment, I might be a presenter and you may be or presenting a conversation and some concepts, and you may be receiving and listening. But I'm equally capable of listening to you when you take on that role of presenter. Now, an archetype is something I can recognize anywhere in the world. It's like a policeman or a mother or a father. And we can all access those kinds of energies, those kinds of mothering energies. Even if you are a man, you can nurture and you can grow others. You can access that. So we can share all of these energies. Now, if we all share all of these energies, then what does it mean in terms of how we label ourselves? Now, I am going to deal with quite, it's a complex, but yet hopefully not a complex concept that we're going to engage with. And let's just open our minds to it. So consciously, for example, I might be that young man that we spoke about earlier, that I'm quite difficult, or maybe let's be a little bit more specific, maybe I'm quite an unsociable human being. I don't get on with people, okay? I tend not to, people are not my first preference in life. So consciously, if I was an iceberg, consciously that part above the waterline is the part I know about myself, right? Now, unconsciously, I am also able to access all those amazing energies that exist in the world and have existed since the beginning of time. So I've been able to access that part of me that is people-orientated and enjoys people. For you, you might be saying, if you're in the plumbing, if you are directly a plumber, you might be saying, I'm technically minded, but I can also be people-minded. But we often live with this label and stay with that. And yet we can access this part of it that is people. So if you take your time for a moment and just write down that label that you have, think of it like the flip side, okay? Take that label, focus on the slide at the moment, and write down what is in the conscious space. Now add all other parts of you that you could access that maybe sit in this unconscious space. Just flip it over like a 5-rand coin, okay? Like if you have to think the opposite of what you have. Unsociable, maybe people-orientated. You will have a different label. Think of that label for yourself, okay? And now we're going to look at it in a different light. We're going to apply our thoughts in a different way. And I want you to think about how we can become stuck in this role even as we interact with other human beings, right? So if I was looking at this unsociable person as an example, I use a negative example because it's generally one of those that we understand. But because I'm going to link it to another human being, you might be that more positive orientated person now. And so you'll see how it plays out for you as well. So as we've said, I'm unsociable, but I can access that part of me that's people orientated. And we may find that people around us, inevitably we surround ourselves with others, hopefully, that have other strengths. And so we will have people who are actually people orientated. So this is another person's iceberg. So now just for a moment, if they are people orientated, they are more dominant in that energy, okay? They are equally capable of being unsocial like myself. But when I am being so unsocial and so difficult, you know, it's like so extreme in my manner, I almost deny in myself that part of me that can be people orientated. Have you ever done that? And energetically, from a quantum physics point of view, we actually project that energy onto that person who's very people orientated. And can you believe it? They become like one of those superheroes. They take on the cape of becoming the super, super duper people orientated person. Now you may say, well, that's good because actually I hired them for that and I need them to do that. But our reality is if we continuously hang on to this label of I'm unsociable and maybe let's turn it around and use it, I'm more technically inclined, okay? The reality is you still, even if you're a technically inclined person and your role is to be technical, at some point you still need to have some form of people orientation. Now let's look at what happens with a person who's people orientated. This person denies the fact that they have some kind of technical, let's use the example of technical, it's a little closer to home, that they have some kind of technical capacity. It might not look like this exactly. And when they deny it, they almost set you up as only being the person, you become that superhero of only being technically capable. And so we land up over time becoming very stuck in our roles. And you can imagine that this becomes really difficult because we now almost become conflicted. I am me and you are you. And it's wonderful to have people allocated to tasks in your business, like that's the people person. But if we cannot access that part of us that can recognize we have some people orientation, we almost lose the opportunity to live our life to the fullest, and we invite stuck roles, we invite conflict into our lives, and so we get stuck in those spaces. So here's an opportunity for you that I just want to invite you into. If I am that technical person and you are, I'll be the technical person, and you'll be the people person, okay? And we recognize we can access that part of us. If for one moment you are able to, just for a moment, and this is kind of how do I become unstuck in a way? Not only do I stop treating assessments as facts, but the invitation is for you to look at that part of you. Just take a look at this now. I want you to just follow on the screen. That waterline that you had, I want you to just for a moment lower it by making a statement. Recognizing, just pause. Something that the person opposite to you is talking about in terms of people orientation, just pause for a minute and go, this part I can relate to. I can relate to this part of your people, the people issue. And you lower that waterline of yours so that you become more conscious of the potential and wisdom you have. Just by doing that, you are shifting not only your own energy, but the other person's energy, because now they see, okay, there's a level of flexibility in you. And they can go, okay, so they make mental note to self. I get a little bit about the technical issue. And now we can actually start to find whatever solution or issue creates some of this divide between us. And not only that, I can become able to access the people part of me, and I can become so much more than the label that I have given myself in life. So here's what I would like to just ask you to look at in terms of your feedback to yourself and to others. Healthy feedback focuses on those observable examples that we are working with. Treat the behavior that you have given yourself as a label as just a healthy example of a particular issue or behavior. And then look at, if I was able, for example, if I'm very technically orientated and I'd like to just have enough people skills to really just connect with my wife or spouse at this time, or with my partner in business, or with my colleagues or my client. What could success look like? And it may be really simple. It may be just for me, success looks like I'm going to make that eye contact. I'm going to just say good morning and smile. I know last session we just spoke about a smile. So I want you to think about those things that will open up, even as you think. As I think about being very technical, the language I use, I am not people orientated. No, it's not my first preference to be people orientated, but I am capable of people orientated. It's like art. It's subject to interpretation, and we turn it into facts. I want to end off today with this story. You might have read Jordan Peterson's book, The 12 Rules of Life. I'm not sure whether you have. It's a gem, full of lots of exciting concepts in there. But one of the things he talks about is this pen of light at the end. And it's a story. My friend, and I'm going to just for a moment switch on the webcam so that we can actually see each other as we engage. But the story goes that one of his friends, and it's my view of it, so don't treat it as exactly written like this, but my friend has a pen which has a light on it, right? And I look at that pen and I think I really want that pen with a light on, because what's going through my mind is that I'd really like to see what I could write about that would illuminate some of the dark spaces around me. And my invitation to you is to take up your pen and go, what else can I write about? Other than that single label, that single mathematical exercise, what can I write about that maybe illuminates the dark places, the parts that I don't acknowledge in myself? Just for a moment, how else could I write about that? And let me focus my mind on writing about that. So with that in mind, and let's just take a practical example. If you just took a pen and you went, okay, I am technical and I am more than that, and you just free wrote about what else you are, very quickly you will no longer just be a label, like a label on a container, but you will become a brand that is much more wholesome around that technicality. And now you can lead a more wholesome and full life, not always in reverting back to that example where you were a label. And it's so quick and it's so easy. And even good things, you know, if I'm always a solutions provider, I will now know that I'm also capable of being vulnerable and seeking help. And I don't have to be so alone in that space. And that's the invitation today. Please take your pen and just light up those spaces for you that might be dark. Not dark bad, but just dark. I haven't focused on them, and there's an opportunity potentially to live a fuller life when I do that. Be a fuller boss, be a fuller husband, be a fuller wife, be a fuller dad. Just be present in a different way and enjoy that quality of my life. So let's pause there. And I just want to ask you now, if there's anybody now who has some kind of thought, some focus where you have kind of lived with a label and something has hit home for you today, just for a moment, that you might want to just indicate, okay, yes, it has hit home for me, or something has hit home, or yes, I make assessments instead of facts and I treat them as facts, because that language in itself impacts other people and you. So where are you in this moment? And if you can just share just for a moment where you are. And Steve, it might be lovely, I know I pick on you a lot, it would be lovely to have somebody else. And if you would like to share a story just of where you have been that label, it may be good to see. Okay, Steve, any example you have in this way?
Yeah, Debbie, I think that, you know, and again, when I look at my life, I mean, I've had that stigma of, you know, you're a rubbish, you know, you'll never account to be anything. And you get told that so many times that you actually do believe it. But then there's that one person that comes along that actually says that you're not, you know, and even then you question yourself because you've got one person out of 10 telling you that, you know, you aren't this rubbish or this, you know, you're just a plumber or whatever the case may be. But when you take and you look at that and you start applying that, and I know in my life it was like that through all the dark times and everything else, is to start looking at that change and start to say, okay, how do I start making that difference? And for me, I was always very vocal, always very challenging in terms of, and I haven't changed that, but it was just the way that it came across in terms of how you're going to make a difference and how you're going to change. And I still have that today. I mean, I'll go to areas that I grew up and they'll still remember the bad, where you were this fighter and this guy that was always drunk and rolling people around all over the place. But they still see that, and it takes a lot for people to actually sit down and actually see that you've made that change. And I think we have that a lot when I deal with people. I'm just a plumber. That stigma of I'm just a plumber, and the guys seem to just hold on to, and that's as much as they're going to be. And I think they need to realize that that statement is untrue. You're not just a plumber, you're a professional, you're really good at what you do, and you need to start looking at the pros in terms of what you do. when there's a query and, you know, say a technical thing or a complaint that's come through, it's like, I'm not an attorney, I'm just a plumber. So I think the guys need to look at it, and I'm not saying that everybody's in the same space, but is to start looking at yourself and saying, well, how do I make that difference? How do I get out of the stigma of the label? And for me, I took the label off. You know, people can stick it, but I've got the rights and the way in which to take it off, because I know for myself that that is not true. So you can have whatever you believe is what you think of me or whatever, but I've taken that label off and I've thrown it away, and you can put as many as you like, but they're not going to stick.
Yes, thank you for that, Steve. And it's just so real. We often will accept a label we either give ourselves or other people give us. And I just love that. I had a visual, as you said, I just ripped that label off. And it may not be so easy for everyone, but it's almost a sense, you know, I know there were certain labels I could have attached myself to growing up, and I just went, I'm not choosing that label. But if you have it already, a good thing would be to go and what else am I? Because yes, I am a plumber, but I am an absolute professional. I am offering such an incredible service, and so they go. Thank you so much for your participation and for just talking up through the chat line. It's just such a pleasure to be able to engage with you in that way, because it's in these stories and in these sharings actually that so often the application and the relatability of what we're talking about becomes real, and other people can access their stories through you sharing your stories. So it's an incredible part of being part of an enormous community like this. So as we say goodbye, I just want to thank you for your time, and just again invite you to answer the question, what do I want to write? There's this beautiful thing about in this book which says, what do I want to write on my soul? So what do you want to write on your soul today with your pen of light? Thanks so much for your time, and thanks for being here.